I'm Janet, 28 years old, and I spent most of my life believing I was the family disappointment. While my sister Beverly excelled at everything she touched, I seemed to stumble through life collecting second place finishes and half hearted compliments. For years, I accepted my role as the lesser daughter, the one who would never quite measure up. But there comes a moment when enough is enough, when the words cut so deep that something inside you finally snaps. That moment came for me on a Tuesday evening when my mother delivered the cruelest comparison yet. Before I share what happened that day, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this family drama unfolded and how one sentence changed everything. Growing up in suburban Ohio, I learned early that I would always live in Beverly's shadow. She was 2 years older and seemed to excel effortlessly at everything she attempted. While I struggled with algebra, Beverly was already taking advanced calculus as a sophomore. When I managed to make the JV soccer team, Mom would remind me that Beverly had been varsity captain at the same age. The comparison started small when we were children. During parent-teacher conferences, I would sit in the hallway while Mom discussed my mediocre grades, always hearing Beverly's name mentioned as the standard I should strive to reach. Mrs. Peterson would say things like, "Janet is a sweet girl, but she lacks the natural academic drive that Beverly showed." Mom would nod solemnly, then spend the car ride home explaining how I needed to apply myself more. Beverly maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA throughout high school, while juggling student council president duties, debate team, captain responsibilities, and volunteer work at the local hospital. Meanwhile, I barely managed a 3.2 average, despite spending hours studying. Art class was my only refuge, the one place where I felt genuinely talented and creative. But when I excitedly showed Mom my paintings, she would glance briefly and say, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Beverly won another scholarship competition?" The scholarship announcements became a particular source of pain. Beverly received full rides to 3 Ivy League schools, ultimately choosing Harvard Law. The celebration dinner lasted 3 hours, with extended family calling to congratulate the family genius. When my community college acceptance letter arrived, Mom opened it with visible disappointment. "Well," she sighed, "at least you're continuing your education." Beverly always said community college serves an important purpose. I tried desperately to find my niche throughout high school. I joined the drama club hoping theater might be my calling, but quit after Mom missed my lead role performance to attend Beverly's debate tournament. I attempted track and field thinking maybe athletics would earn recognition, but stopped when Mom casually mentioned that Beverly had been offered athletic scholarships too, though she obviously chose academic excellence instead. Even my artistic abilities, which teachers consistently praised, became another source of comparison. When I won the county art fair's first prize for my oil painting, Mom's response was lukewarm. "Art is a lovely hobby," she said, "but Beverly's internship at that law firm will look much better on college applications. You should consider more practical pursuits." The pattern continued relentlessly through high school graduation. Beverly delivered the valedictorian speech while I sat in the middle of the graduating class, invisible and unremarkable. During the reception afterward, relatives gathered around Beverly asking about her Harvard plans and praising her achievements. I stood near the punch bowl, largely ignored, except for the occasional polite inquiry about my plans for the fall. Even family photos reflected our different status. The mantelpiece displayed Beverly's graduation picture, prominently surrounded by her various award certificates and newspaper clippings about her achievements. My school photos were relegated to a small frame tucked behind Beverly's debate team trophy. The visual hierarchy of our family was clear to anyone who entered our home. Beverly's departure for Harvard created a temporary reprieve from constant comparisons, but Mom found ways to continue the pattern. Weekly phone calls with Beverly became events that I was expected to listen to and admire. Mom would put the calls on speaker, ensuring I heard every detail about Beverly's academic successes, her impressive professors, and her networking opportunities with future Supreme Court justices. Transitioning into adulthood didn't diminish the comparisons. It simply evolved them into new forms. While Beverly excelled at Harvard Law School making law review and securing summer internships at prestigious firms, I struggled to find my footing in the working world. My associate degree in graphic design from the community college led to a position at a small marketing firm downtown, creating advertisements for local businesses. The work satisfied my creative impulses and paid adequately, but Mom consistently referred to it as my little art job. When neighbors asked about her daughters, she would light up describing Beverly's law school achievements, then briefly mention that I did some design work for local companies. The dismissive tone stung every time, reducing my professional efforts to a hobby-level pursuit. Beverly's career trajectory continued its upward climb after graduation. She landed a position at Morrison Sterling and Associates, one of the city's most prestigious law firms, starting at a salary that exceeded my annual income by 3 times. Her business cards bore impressive titles, and her cases occasionally made local news headlines. Mom collected these newspaper clippings religiously, creating a scrapbook dedicated to Beverly's professional triumphs. Meanwhile, I was building my own career path, taking evening classes in digital marketing and web design to expand my skill set. These efforts went largely unnoticed by Mom, who seemed unable to recognize achievements that didn't mirror Beverly's traditional success markers. When I received a promotion to senior designer and a modest salary increase, Mom's response was, "That's wonderful, dear. Did you hear Beverly was selected for the Partners Fast Track program?" My personal life became another source of comparison ammunition. Beverly's relationship with Richard, a cardiac surgeon she met at a charity gala, represented everything Mom valued in a partnership. Richard drove a BMW, owned a downtown condo, and came from a family of medical professionals. Their courtship was featured in the society pages, complete with photos from country club events and fundraising dinners. My dating life, in contrast, was a series of relationships with creative professionals, teachers, and small business owners, who Mom considered nice enough, but not really going anywhere. When I dated Marcus, a talented photographer who owned his own studio, Mom's comments focused on the instability of artistic careers. "He seems sweet," she would say, "but Beverly's Richard has such security and prestige. You should look for someone more established." The relationship with Marcus actually showed promise until Mom's constant questioning about his long-term prospects began affecting my confidence. Her observations about his unconventional schedule and uncertain income planted seeds of doubt that eventually contributed to our breakup. Looking back, I realize how much Mom's disapproval influenced my romantic choices, always measuring potential partners against Beverly's seemingly perfect selection. Family gatherings became particularly challenging during this period. Beverly would arrive with Richard both impeccably dressed and full of stories about their latest achievements and experiences. They had just returned from a weekend in Napa Valley, or Richard had performed a groundbreaking surgery, or Beverly had won a significant case for an important client. I would sit quietly, contributing little to conversations that seemed to revolve around their accomplishments. The engagement announcement came during Beverly's 29th birthday party, an elegant affair that Mom had planned for months. As Beverly displayed her impressive diamond ring, Mom actually cried with joy, immediately beginning plans for what she called the wedding of the century. The engagement dominated family conversations for weeks, with Mom researching venues, discussing guest lists, and consulting bridal magazines. Richard's proposal had taken place during a romantic getaway to Paris, complete with a horse-drawn carriage ride and dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant. The story was repeated countless times to relatives, friends, and anyone who would listen. Mom added details each time, describing the ring's clarity, the restaurant's exclusivity, and the romantic perfection of the entire weekend. During this same period, I was struggling financially while trying to establish my freelance graphic design business on weekends and evenings. The goal was eventually to become fully self-employed, building a client base that would allow creative freedom and better income potential. However, the transition required significant time investment and initial financial sacrifice that Mom viewed as impractical and risky. "Beverly has such stability," Mom would observe when I mentioned working late on client projects. She knows exactly where her next paycheck is coming from. This freelance idea seems so uncertain, Janet. Maybe you should focus on advancing at your current job instead of these side projects. Everything changed when Dad suffered his heart attack on a Tuesday morning in March. The call came while I was working on a logo design for a local restaurant. Mom's panicked voice barely coherent as she explained that Dad had collapsed at work and was being rushed to the hospital. I immediately dropped everything and drove to meet her in the emergency room, where we spent the next 8 hours waiting for news about his condition. The surgery was successful, but Dad's recovery would require extended hospitalization, followed by months of cardiac rehabilitation. More importantly, for our family's financial stability, Dad would be unable to work for at least 6 months, possibly longer, depending on his progress. As a high school principal, Dad's salary had been the primary source of our family's income, with Mom working only part-time at a local library. During Dad's second week in the hospital, Mom finally revealed the full extent of their financial vulnerability. They had been living paycheck to paycheck for years, with most of their savings depleted by previous medical expenses and home repairs. Dad's extended absence from work would create an immediate crisis, especially when combined with mounting hospital bills that their insurance wouldn't fully cover. "I don't know what we're going to do," Mom confided during one of our hospital visits. "The mortgage payment is due next week, and we're already behind on the utilities. Your father's pride would be crushed if he knew how bad things have gotten." Her hands shook as she calculated numbers on a small notepad, trying to make impossible math work. Without hesitation, I offered to help cover their immediate expenses. My freelance work had been growing steadily, and while I wasn't wealthy, I could manage their mortgage payment for a few months. "Don't worry about asking Beverly," I suggested. "She's so busy with the wedding planning and her work. I can handle this until Dad gets back on his feet." Mom's relief was palpable, though she struggled to accept help from her less successful daughter. "Are you sure you can afford this? I know your art business isn't exactly booming." The comment stung, but I pushed past the familiar criticism and assured her that helping family was my priority. Over the following weeks, I took on additional freelance projects, working 12-hour days to cover both my expenses and my parents' bills. I designed websites for small businesses, created marketing materials for local nonprofits, and accepted every project that came my way, regardless of how challenging or time-consuming. My social life disappeared as I worked weekends and evenings, determined to keep my parents financially stable. The irony wasn't lost on me that while Beverly planned her lavish wedding discussing flower arrangements and venue options, I was quietly ensuring our parents didn't lose their home. Mom continued to update Beverly about Dad's medical progress, but somehow never mentioned the financial crisis or my contributions to solving it. Beverly remained focused on her own life, which I understood, but found increasingly frustrating. My freelance business actually began thriving under the pressure of necessity. The additional work led to referrals and repeat clients, slowly building the reputation I had been working toward for years. However, Mom seemed unable to recognize this success, still referring to my work as those little projects and expressing concern about my unstable career choice. The financial pressure was enormous, but what hurt more was Mom's continued dismissive attitude toward my sacrifices. When I mentioned being tired from working late, she would suggest that I needed to manage my time better like Beverly does. When I couldn't attend a family dinner because of a client deadline, she would comment that Beverly always makes time for family despite her demanding schedule. 3 months into Dad's recovery, I had contributed over $15,000 to keep my parents afloat, draining most of my savings and emergency fund. Yet Mom continued to praise Beverly's success and question my life choices, seemingly oblivious to the fact that her less accomplished daughter was single-handedly preventing financial disaster. The situation reached a breaking point during Beverly's engagement party, an elaborate celebration that Mom had insisted on hosting despite our family's financial struggles. Using some of the money I had been providing, Mom hired caterers, rented elegant linens, and transformed our backyard into what she called a proper showcase for Beverly's achievement. Beverly arrived looking radiant in a designer dress, her engagement ring catching the light as she graciously accepted congratulations from the 50 guests Mom had invited. Richard stood beside her in his perfectly tailored suit, discussing his latest surgical successes with the assembled crowd of family friends and distant relatives. The party was everything Mom had envisioned, a celebration worthy of her successful daughter. I had spent the morning helping with preparations, arranging flowers, and setting up tables, while Mom directed every detail with military precision. "Make sure Beverly's place cards are positioned perfectly," she instructed. "This needs to be absolutely flawless for her special day." I smiled and complied, swallowing my resentment about funding a celebration for someone who had been absent during our family's crisis. During the toasts, relative after relative praised Beverly's accomplishments and her choice of such an impressive fiancé. Uncle Harold raised his glass to the family success story, while Aunt Margaret gushed about how proud Mom must be to have such an exceptional daughter. I stood near the back of the crowd applauding politely, while feeling increasingly invisible. The moment that shattered my remaining patience came when Mom was asked about both her daughters during the reception. Mrs. Coleman from down the street inquired about how both girls were doing, and Mom's response revealed everything about her true feelings. "Beverly is obviously thriving," she began, gesturing toward the happy couple. "She's made partner track at the firm, engaged to this wonderful man, and planning the most beautiful wedding. Janet is still figuring things out with her little art projects." The casual dismissal delivered in front of people who had known me since childhood felt like a physical blow. I had been working myself to exhaustion to keep our family financially stable, sacrificing my own security and future, only to be characterized as someone still figuring things out. The humiliation burned in my chest as neighboring friends nodded sympathetically, clearly viewing me as the family disappointment. Later that evening, as I helped clean up from the party, I had essentially funded Mom continued her stream of Beverly-focused commentary. "Wasn't she just radiant tonight? Richard's family was so impressed with everything." This is exactly the kind of celebration Beverly deserves after all her hard work and success. The praise continued relentlessly as we packed up leftover food and folded rented tables. Every aspect of the evening was analyzed and celebrated, from Beverly's gracious speech to Richard's charming interactions with our relatives. Not once did Mom acknowledge my role in making the celebration possible, or recognize that her unsuccessful daughter had been the one ensuring the family could afford such luxuries. My exhaustion wasn't just physical anymore, it was emotional and spiritual. Working multiple jobs to support parents who couldn't see my value was taking a toll that I was struggling to manage. Sleep had become elusive as financial stress and emotional hurt combined to create a constant state of anxiety. I was sacrificing my health, my relationships, and my future for people who viewed my contributions as inadequate. The breaking point was approaching rapidly, though I didn't recognize it yet. The combination of financial pressure, emotional dismissal, and constant comparison was building toward an explosion that would forever change our family dynamics. The little girl who had always sought Mom's approval was finally reaching her limit. 2 weeks after Beverly's engagement party, our family gathered for Sunday dinner, a tradition Mom had maintained despite Dad's ongoing recovery. Beverly arrived with exciting news about her latest promotion to senior associate, complete with a substantial salary increase that she announced with barely contained excitement. The promotion came with a corner office, a prestigious client roster, and recognition as one of the firm's rising stars. Mom's reaction was immediate and effusive. She clapped her hands together with delight, immediately calling Dad from the living room to share the wonderful news. "Did you hear that Harold Beverly made senior associate at her age, the youngest in the firm's history?" Her pride was unmistakable as she peppered Beverly with questions about the promotion details, the salary increase, and what this meant for her future partnership prospects. The celebration continued throughout dinner preparation, with Mom repeatedly expressing her amazement at Beverly's achievement. "I always knew you were destined for greatness," she gushed, while setting the table with her finest china, treating the meal as another impromptu celebration. This is exactly what I dreamed of when you were little, watching you excel at everything you touched. During this same conversation, I mentioned landing my biggest freelance contract, yet a comprehensive rebranding project for a regional restaurant chain that would provide steady income for the next 6 months. The project represented a significant milestone in my business development, potentially leading to similar corporate clients and establishing my reputation in the commercial design market. Mom's response to my news was distracted and minimal. "That's nice, dear," she said without looking up from the salad she was preparing. "How much will that pay?" When I mentioned the contract value, she nodded absently and immediately returned her attention to Beverly's promotion details. The contrast in enthusiasm was stark and hurtful, reducing my professional breakthrough to a minor footnote in Beverly's celebration. Beverly then casually mentioned her vacation plans with Richard, a 2-week European tour scheduled for the fall. They had booked first-class flights to London with stops in Paris, Rome, and Barcelona, staying at luxury hotels and planning to visit exclusive restaurants and private wine tastings. The trip would cost more than I earned in 6 months, but Beverly discussed it as a well-deserved reward for their hard work. Mom listened to these vacation plans with visible longing, commenting wistfully about how wonderful it must be to afford such luxuries. "I can't even remember the last time your father and I took a real vacation," she sighed. "We've been talking about visiting your Aunt Ruth in Florida for years, but we never seem to have the money for travel." The irony was crushing. While Beverly planned expensive vacations, I had been quietly funding our parents' basic living expenses for months. The money that could have taken Mom and Dad to Florida was instead keeping them in their home, paying utilities and covering medical expenses. Yet somehow this practical support was invisible compared to Beverly's glamorous lifestyle choices. As dinner progressed, Mom continued sharing updates about Beverly's life that highlighted the growing gap between my sister's success and my perceived failures. Beverly's law firm was featured in a prestigious legal magazine. Richard had been invited to speak at a medical conference in Chicago. Their engagement photo had been selected for the society page of the regional newspaper. Each achievement was celebrated and analyzed, while my own progress remained unacknowledged. The conversation inevitably turned to my appearance and lifestyle choices topics that Mom approached with barely concealed disapproval. My casual dress was compared unfavorably to Beverly's professional wardrobe. My single status was contrasted with Beverly's stable relationship. My unconventional career path was questioned in light of Beverly's traditional success trajectory. "You know, Janet," Mom said while serving dessert, "Beverly's success didn't happen by accident. She made smart choices focused on stability and built a proper foundation for her future. Maybe it's time you considered following her example instead of these risky creative pursuits." The building tension was becoming unbearable. Every word felt like another small cut, another reminder of my inadequacy in Mom's eyes. The financial sacrifice I had been making was not only unrecognized, but actively dismissed as evidence of my poor life choices. The daughter who had been keeping the family afloat was being lectured about following the example of the daughter who had been completely absent during the crisis. My emotional reserves were depleted from months of financial stress over work and constant criticism. The combination of exhaustion and resentment was creating a volatile mixture that was approaching its breaking point. Something had to give, and I could feel that moment approaching with each dismissive comment and unfavorable comparison. The final confrontation came 3 days later on a Wednesday evening when I stopped by to drop off the mortgage payment for the following month. Mom was in the kitchen reviewing wedding magazines that Beverly had left during her recent visit, making notes about reception venues and floral arrangements for what she had started calling the event of the decade. I placed the envelope containing the mortgage check on the counter, as had become our monthly routine over the past 4 months. The amount represented nearly half of my current monthly income, a sacrifice that required careful budgeting and continuous additional work to maintain. Yet Mom took the envelope without acknowledgement, as if the money materialized from thin air, rather than from her daughter's depleted savings account. "Beverly found the most exquisite venue," Mom announced without looking up from the magazine. The Riverside Country Club has an opening for next spring, and she's putting down a deposit tomorrow. The ballroom overlooks the river, and they can accommodate 300 guests. It's exactly what she deserves for her special day. I calculated quickly in my head. The venue Mom was describing cost more than I had contributed to my parents' expenses over the entire 4-month period. The irony of Beverly spending lavishly on a single day while I struggled to keep our parents housed was overwhelming. Yet somehow my sacrifices remained invisible, while Beverly's expenditures were celebrated as appropriate and deserved. The breaking point came when Mom shifted her attention from the wedding magazines to my appearance and life choices. "You know, Janet, you really should take better care of yourself. Look at how put together Beverly always looks, even when she's just stopping by casually. And this freelance thing, it's been years now, and you're still struggling financially. Maybe it's time to accept that some people are just meant for more traditional paths." Her words hit like physical blows, each comparison a reminder of my perceived inadequacy. The financial struggles she mentioned were directly related to my supporting them, but this connection seemed lost on Mom entirely. In her mind, Beverly's success justified itself, while my sacrifices indicated failure rather than generosity. The final devastating blow came when Mom looked directly at me with an expression of disappointment and frustration. Her next words would change everything between us, crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. "I just don't understand why you can't be more like your sister. Beverly has everything figured out. Career, relationship, future plans. You'll never be as good as your sister Janet. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can find some way to be content with less." The words hung in the air between us, more cruel than anything she had ever said before. The casual delivery made them even more crushing, as if she were stating an obvious fact rather than destroying her daughter's self-worth. For 28 years, I had suspected this was her true feeling, but hearing it stated so bluntly was devastating. But something unexpected happened in that moment of absolute pain. Instead of collapsing into familiar feelings of inadequacy and shame, I felt something else entirely: clarity. The fog of years of self-doubt suddenly lifted, revealing the truth about our situation with startling precision. I wasn't the failure in this scenario. I was the daughter who had stepped up when it mattered most. The response that came out of my mouth surprised even me with its calm conviction. "Then ask her to pay your bills." Mom's expression shifted from smug superiority to shocked confusion. "What did you say?" "I said ask her to pay your bills." My voice remained steady as 28 years of suppressed truth finally found expression. "Ask your successful daughter to cover your mortgage. Ask her to pay Dad's medical expenses. Ask her to handle the utilities and the car payment and all the other expenses I've been covering for the past 4 months. The color drained from Mom's face as the reality of my words began to register. For the first time, she was forced to confront the disconnect between her perceptions and reality. The daughter she had been praising had been absent during our family's greatest crisis, while the daughter she constantly criticized had been holding everything together. Mom's mouth opened and closed several times without producing words, her carefully constructed worldview crumbling in real time. The magazine slipped from her hands as she struggled to process what I had just revealed, not just the facts about Beverly's absence, but the implications of my presence during their crisis. I didn't realize," she stammered, but I wasn't finished. "Didn't realize what, Mom?" "That while Beverly was planning engagement parties and European vacations, I was working 16-hour days to keep you from losing your house. That while you were bragging about her corner office, I was draining my savings account to cover Dad's medical bills." My voice remained calm, but each word carried the weight of months of accumulated frustration. I began detailing exactly what my contributions had covered, pulling out my phone to show bank statements and payment confirmations. March mortgage payment, my money. April utilities, my money. Dad's prescription medications, my money. The catering for Beverly's engagement party, my money. The list continued as Mom's face grew paler with each revelation. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, though we both knew the answer. She hadn't wanted to know. Acknowledging my financial support would have required reconsidering her fundamental assumptions about both her daughters. I did tell you, Mom. Every time I handed you a check, every time I mentioned working extra hours, every time I said I was helping with expenses. You just chose not to see it because it didn't fit your narrative about which daughter was successful and which one was struggling. The truth was liberating in ways I hadn't expected. Years of suppressed resentment poured out as I described the constant comparisons, the dismissive comments about my career, the complete invisibility of my sacrifices. Do you know what it's like to work yourself to exhaustion, helping someone who treats your efforts like they're worthless? To sacrifice your own financial security for parents who can't see past their favorite daughter's accomplishments? Mom began crying, but I couldn't stop the flood of honesty that was finally breaking free. Beverly doesn't even know about Dad's financial problems, does she? Because you were too proud to ask your successful daughter for help, but perfectly comfortable taking money from your disappointment daughter without even acknowledging where it came from. The revelation about Beverly's ignorance regarding their parents' situation was perhaps the most damning aspect of the entire confrontation. Mom had created a hierarchy of daughters so rigid that she would rather accept help from the one she deemed less worthy than risk tarnishing the image of the one she deemed perfect. She would have helped if she knew, Mom protested weakly, but even she seemed to doubt the conviction behind her words. Would she? Or would she have been too busy with her important cases and expensive vacation plans? You'll never know because you never gave her the chance to prove whether your perfect daughter would actually step up when family needed her most. The conversation continued for another hour with Mom alternating between defensive justifications and tearful apologies. She tried to explain her behavior as coming from a place of wanting the best for both her daughters, but the explanations fell flat when confronted with the reality of how her favoritism had played out during an actual crisis. I made it clear that while I didn't regret helping during Dad's emergency, I was done being treated as the lesser daughter while providing the greater support. I'm not asking you to love me more than Beverly, I explained. I'm asking you to see me clearly, to acknowledge what I actually contribute instead of what you think I should be contributing. The dynamic between us had shifted permanently during that kitchen confrontation. For the first time in my life, Mom was forced to see me as I actually was, rather than as a disappointing version of what Beverly represented. The conversation ended with her promise to call Beverly and explain the full situation, including my role in keeping them financially stable. The weeks following our confrontation brought changes I never could have anticipated. Mom did call Beverly, and that conversation lasted over 2 hours as she explained not only Dad's ongoing medical issues, but also the financial crisis and my months of support. Beverly's reaction was a mixture of shock, guilt, and immediate offers to help going forward. Beverly called me the next day, her voice subdued and apologetic. Janet, I had no idea about any of this. Mom never mentioned financial problems, and I assumed Dad's insurance was covering everything. I feel terrible that you've been handling all of this alone. Her genuine remorse was evident, and for the first time in years, we had an honest conversation about our family dynamics. I would have helped immediately if I'd known, she continued. I can't believe I was planning expensive vacations while you were draining your savings to keep them afloat. That's not the kind of person I want to be. Beverly immediately arranged to take over the major expenses going forward, including Dad's medical bills and setting up an emergency fund for future crises. More importantly, Beverly began to understand how Mom's constant comparisons had affected both of us. I never realized the pressure you were under, she admitted. I always thought Mom's praise was just normal parental pride, but hearing her describe how she talked to you makes me sick. You've been the responsible one all along, and I've been completely oblivious. The relationship between Beverly and me began healing in ways I hadn't thought possible. We started having regular phone conversations where she asked about my business and actually listened to my responses. She began referring clients to me when they needed design work, and she made a point of mentioning my professional accomplishments during family gatherings. Mom's transformation was more gradual and equally significant. The initial shock of realizing her misjudgment evolved into a genuine effort to change ingrained patterns of behavior. She began asking about my clients by name, celebrating when I landed new contracts, and stopping herself mid-sentence when she started to make comparisons between Beverly and me. The change wasn't perfect or immediate. Decades of established thinking patterns don't disappear overnight, and Mom occasionally slipped back into old habits. But now, when she caught herself making dismissive comments about my career, or comparing me unfavorably to Beverly, she would stop and apologize. "I'm sorry, Janet. That was the old me talking. Tell me more about this project you're excited about." Perhaps most significantly, Mom began acknowledging my contributions publicly. When neighbors asked about her daughters, she started mentioning my business success alongside Beverly's legal achievements. "Beverly is doing wonderfully at the law firm, and Janet has built such an impressive design business. I'm proud of both my daughters for different reasons." The financial stability of the family improved dramatically once Beverly became involved. She not only took over the immediate expenses, but also helped Mom and Dad create a budget and emergency fund that would prevent future crises. Dad's recovery progressed well, and he was able to return to work part-time after 6 months with a plan to resume full duties the following year. My own life began flourishing once the financial pressure was relieved and family support replaced family criticism. The freelance business continued growing, eventually reaching the point where I could leave my day job and focus entirely on my own company. The confidence that came from finally standing up for myself translated into better client relationships and more ambitious projects. I also began dating again this time, with the self-assurance that came from knowing my worth wasn't dependent on others' approval. When I met David, a teacher and amateur musician, I introduced him to my family without anxiety about Mom's potential criticisms. Her response was genuinely welcoming, focusing on his kindness and intelligence, rather than his salary or prestige level. 6 months after that life-changing confrontation in Mom's kitchen, our family gathered for Thanksgiving dinner with a completely different dynamic than any previous holiday. Beverly and Richard were there along with David, and the conversation flowed naturally between everyone's interests and achievements without the underlying tension that had characterized previous gatherings. Mom had spent the weeks before Thanksgiving planning the meal carefully, making sure to include dishes that everyone enjoyed, rather than just the elaborate presentations she thought would impress Beverly. She asked about my favorite dessert and made a point of preparing it alongside Beverly's preferred apple pie. These small gestures represented enormous progress in recognizing both daughters as equally valuable family members. During dinner, when Uncle Harold asked about how the girls were doing, Mom's response reflected her new understanding of our different but equally valuable paths. "Beverly's doing wonderfully at the law firm, and she and Richard are planning such a beautiful wedding for next spring. Janet's design business has really taken off this year, and she just landed a contract with a major restaurant chain. I'm so proud of how hard both my daughters work and how they've built such different but successful careers." The conversation continued naturally, with both Beverly and me contributing stories about our work relationships and plans. David fitted seamlessly into the family dynamic, discussing education policy with Dad and sharing music recommendations with Beverly. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely comfortable bringing someone I cared about into our family circle. Perhaps most tellingly, when Beverly announced that she and Richard had decided to postpone their European vacation to help establish the family emergency fund, Mom's response was immediate pride, rather than disappointment about the canceled luxury trip. "That's so thoughtful of you both," she said. "Family comes first, and knowing we have that security will help your father and me sleep so much better." The evening progressed with genuine warmth and connection that had been missing from our family interactions for years. We played board games after dinner with Mom, laughing at my terrible attempts at charades and cheering when David and I won at Scrabble. The competitiveness was friendly rather than loaded with underlying comparisons or judgments. As I helped clean up after dinner, Mom pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Janet, I need you to know how sorry I am for all those years of making you feel less than Beverly. You were both wonderful daughters in different ways, and I was too blind to see it. You saved our family this year, not just financially, but emotionally too. You taught me to be a better mother. Her apology was heartfelt and specific, acknowledging not just general mistakes, but particular incidents that had hurt me over the years. She referenced the art fair dismissal, the career criticisms, and dozens of other moments when she had failed to see my value. I don't expect you to forget all those times I let you down, she continued, but I hope you can see that I'm trying to do better going forward. The healing process wasn't complete, but it was genuine and ongoing. We had established new patterns of communication based on honesty rather than comparison, support rather than criticism. Beverly and I were developing an adult relationship based on mutual respect rather than competitive dynamics imposed by parental favoritism. My business continued thriving as my confidence grew and my professional network expanded. The restaurant chain contract led to additional corporate clients, and I was able to hire an assistant to help manage the increasing workload. More importantly, I was pursuing creative projects that excited me rather than just accepting any available work to meet financial obligations. The relationship with David deepened as well, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values, rather than my previous pattern of seeking validation through romantic relationships. He appreciated my artistic abilities, supported my business ambitions, and integrated naturally into my family relationships without creating additional stress or conflict. Looking back on that confrontation in Mom's kitchen, I realized it had been the most important moment of my adult life. Finding the courage to speak truth to someone who had controlled my self-image for decades was terrifying, but it was also liberating in ways I couldn't have imagined. The little girl who had spent years seeking approval had finally learned to approve of herself. Sometimes the person who needs to hear your worth the most is yourself, but sometimes you have to say it out loud to someone else before you can truly believe it. That Wednesday evening, when I finally stood up and demanded to be seen clearly, I wasn't just changing my relationship with Mom. I was claiming my own value and refusing to accept less than I deserved. The family dynamic had shifted permanently, based now on reality rather than perception, on actual contributions rather than imagined hierarchies. We still had work to do in rebuilding trust and changing old patterns, but we were doing it together as a family that finally saw and valued each member clearly. Have you ever had a moment when you finally found the courage to stand up for yourself after years of being undervalued? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by someone else's comparisons. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about finding your voice and claiming your value. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it inspires you to recognize your own worth even when others can't see it yet. Remember, sometimes the most important person you need to convince of your value is yourself, and speaking that truth out loud can change everything.